So this is what it looks like with the slip tubes in there. And again, those aren't welded, so I can take this thing apart if I need to. If I want to move it outside, all I have to do is just put a pair of pliers on here and break that loose. And even if I ruin it, it's no big deal to replace that. So really the only thing you'll see here, I'm missing some neti pots. I bought them out, so I've got more of those coming. So I've gone about as far as I can go until I get my pump, and I've got aerating stones and air pump and stuff that I'll get that hooked up to. So the only thing that I can do left, or the only thing left to do, would be to go ahead and cap these ends. And so just like on the other end, I got a cap, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and cut a slot out of the bottom of this, or cut this bottom flange, because this is my downhill side, and then that will just go ahead and let it drain right back into my tank. The system is designed to be expanded. I can make some more of these tubes and add more and more and more as I go if I wanted to. So, but if I do that, if I exceed the length of my tank, I'm going to have to take and plumb into the bottom here for a return manifold, if that makes any sense. But the way it is right now, from this tube to this one is less than the 6 feet length of the tank, so everything will just fall right back into the tank. So rather than tearing up the tubes, I'll just go ahead and cut this cap, and I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so that's what this looks like after it's cut. Now these caps on the ends, I won't glue these caps for the future in case I end up with a bunch of roots in there and I need to clean this tube out. The other end, they're siliconed on, and then the three sides and the bottom are silicone to keep that watertight up there on that end. But this cap will slide on, and I'll hold it back 1/8 of an inch or so. And this also does a couple things. One, we don't want any light inside the tube with the roots. Also, the advantage of this over a manifold is I can actually gauge the water flow through each tube, and I'll be able to actually see the return flow from each tube dropping back into the tank. So in case I have plugged lines or something's fouled up, you know, I'll be able to check that. So like I say, I'm kind of about half done now until I get some more parts. So when I get those, we'll get going again on it. Anyway, I've decided to go ahead and add some Dutch buckets into my system, so I got 5 of those. I'll be plumbing that up here in a second. So here's my return line. I haven't got the drip lines on there yet, but you can see all I did was just took a 2-inch clamp. It's 2-inch PVC, which will be the return line for the 5. Then I just come down to here, do a 90, and then reduce it down to 1.25 inch PVC, and then it just drops straight back off into the tank. So let me get a little bit further and show you some more pictures. So this is what it looks like after I've drilled the holes into my return line. And now these buckets, these Dutch buckets, this is a production hydroponic bucket. Keep in mind, you could definitely use any square bucket. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that, you know, have people putting these Dutch buckets together, and they're making them from scratch. If you're tight on funds, I'd definitely suggest doing that. These are just a 3/4 inch grommet, and then it's got a 3/4 inch 90-degree double barbed poly fitting, and then this is just flexible poly pipe. And if I can pull that out, you can see that's all it is. Very simple. And then this is my drip line hard rail, and it's just 1/2 inch PVC. Did the same thing with the barb connectors. The camera under control. The barb connectors right here, I epoxied them in bins. I'm mating plastic to PVC. There's really not any production glues that I have found that really work besides epoxy. So, and that 1/2 inch fits right up against the return line, and that piece of wood just runs right in there. And I'll get some clamps eventually and clamp that up nice and solid just to make it clean. So anyway, that shows you what I've done with that. So now I need to finish. I've got the fittings. I'll trim this out and get the drip line rail plumbed over to where the pump is going to be there. So check back here in a bit. So this is what it looks like after it's plumbed up. The pump intake, or exhaust I guess, the intake for the system is here. So this is what I have went ahead and just plumbed up. This is my flow valve for the Dutch buckets. You can see how it just flows right up in there and ties in. Got the drip lines. Essentially this is ready to go with the exception of the clamps on the 1/2 inch PVC line. So kind of step back, kind of see how things are progressing. So far this is what my system is looking like. So tomorrow I'll go down and get my pump, being the bank was closed today, and we'll try to get that wired up, and we're getting pretty close here to doing a test run. So we'll see what kind of leak situation I've got. Anyway, later. This is the pump that I finally got down and got. Echo 633. So, and I'm reading the chart on the back of it. It pumps 633 gallons per hour, and it'll pump up to a 7-foot head. So anyway, it's around a $100 pump. It ought to drive the system plenty well. The reason why I put all the bulb valves in it so I don't start blowing lines off. And I'm going to tie this into, here's my timer that I'm going to use. It's by Titan Controls. And again, like I stated earlier, I'm looking to run the pump for 10-15 minutes up to 4 times a day. That'll be some experimenting. So anyway, I'll get this plumbed in and show you how I did that. So this is what it looks like when the pump is mounted in there. The pump has a 3/4 inch discharge. So I went from 3/4, and then that's 3/4 inch heater hose. I wanted to stick with the rubber instead of a poly, so I can take it apart if I need to without having to cut it apart. And then I just have a poly barbed 3/4 female fitting, and that goes to a 3/4 to 1/2 inch bushing reducer, and then tied that basically into my line. So I think we're ready for a water test, so that'll be coming up here before too long. So we'll check back in a bit. The water tests and more. Probably we need to hang the grow lights up yet, and that's going to be in part 4 of this series. So looking forward to explaining that to you. See you later.